There we go. We're live. Hey, we're live. I am Kelly Hoey, author of the book Build Your Dream Network, and welcome to this crazy experiment I call Planet Hoey, based on an email from a book reader. And with me, not on Twitter, this is so awesome, my dear friend Joyce Sullivan. And we are here today, this afternoon, to talk careers, career transition. Joyce and I have got a wealth of experience, not because we've watched other people do it, these career transitions. We've lived and breathed them. And so I really, particularly today, want to really get Joyce's advice, because as you've shared before, Joyce, you went through the involuntary, career transition during the last financial crisis. You've been there, you've lived it. For people who don't know your story, do you mind giving us a little bit of that background, where you are today, and then we'll get in some real nuts and bolts. For everyone watching, this is live interactive video, which means you can participate. So you can do things like this. Thank you for being here, Meryl. We're really happy to be, you're here. If you've got questions, you've obviously figured out the chat function over there on YouTube. Please ask questions, folks. I've got endless questions for Joyce. She's got a wealth of information and advice, but let's hear from you as well. So Joyce, back to you. Take us back story to 2008, 2009.
Thank you. So Kelly, first of all, I'm just thrilled to be here. When Kelly asks, it's like, of course. But again, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to your audience. So look, like many people, I used to kid about the last time I was out of work. I was there 13, and I had always had a job, right? And then 2008, for some of you recall, the financial services crisis, what I call had a bit of a hiccup, so to speak, globally. And through no fault of my own, my job got eliminated. I worked at a global bank. I ran big technology projects. My biggest problem was picking which project I was going to work on next, because I was in demand. So it had nothing to do with performance, but the world changed, similar to what we're experiencing now. So at least that story was in 2008. I, again, was busy, had my head down doing my day job. And all of a sudden I looked up and I thought, okay, what do I do now? And I, at that time, got my company offered me this, career outplacement that I took advantage of. And what was interesting about that was that for once I was able to pause and think about, what was I really good at? Now, it wasn't that I wasn't good at my job, but at least I had this chance to think about it. So if any of you are going through this, if you certainly have companies that they've offered some kind of, outplacement, certainly hope you take advantage. But at that time, I had no idea what it was. I wound up showing up. And what I learned a couple of things. One was that I was meeting the most amazing people. Now, of course, this was in person, not virtual. But I realized there was a whole world of people out there with all kinds of skills and abilities and talents who had forgotten how fabulous they were because they had lost their job. And I remember thinking, but you're still fabulous. I mean, you're still who you are. And that's one of the things I talk to people about when they go through this experience is because you no longer have a business card with your name and a company's name on it, it doesn't diminish who you are. I mean, you are still as fantastic as you've always been. I think it's just realizing, the power and the knowledge that you have between your ears, that goes with you. That goes with you everywhere you go. So again, just kind of the arc of my career 11 years ago, I was always fascinated by the world, as how Kelly and I met, of talking to people online. Now, that was 11 years ago, not much of a thing, but I was really fascinated that you could find your people online. And, one of the stories I've told over the years is that my daughter, who was 16 at the time, started on a blog, and I thought, who are these people you're talking to? And again, this is probably 15 years ago. And long story short, she wound up connecting with an industry with people who were like her. And not only did she eventually meet them in person, they welcomed her. She got access to proprietary, it was something out in California. It just established her as an industry expert only because she had been online and said hello. So anyway, my story is that I came out of a traditional industry. Never in my wildest dreams thought I'd be out of work. I had no plans of ever leaving my company. And then life happened. So I at least took a look back at, well, what am I good at? And I listened to the people around me in my network and listened to what they said. You're really good at this. I'm thinking, really? I've never done that. They're like, you're natural. So that's the other thing. You may have skills that you have no idea that are really fantastic because you just take it for granted.
Yeah.
So anyway, from that today, I've gone from, I worked at a startup in Austin, Texas, doing social media for financial regulated industries. I founded my own company, again, being a specialist in social media for regulated industries. I've been a university professor. Again, they approached me and said, would you design a class to teach virtually online for undergrads to have a professional presence and to learn how to speak to organizations? And so I did that for 5 years. And currently I work for a global career transformation firm known as LHH, Lee Heck Harrison, where I'm the director of their operations. And so where I am now, certainly like many of you in your home offices, I in the middle of March, within 24 hours, I have probably 9,000 people that ultimately get services through the company in the Northeast that I oversee. And literally in 24 to 48 hours, we figured out how to move everything online, how to have all the coaches deliver virtually. And so I went from having a daily stand-up call that I ran every day with our leadership team to now we meet every other day because like we can wait every 48 hours versus 24. So I'm smiling and not to make light of the situation that we're in, but I thought when big events happen, now 2008 happened, obviously that was a huge event. This is bigger and more profound, and it's at the core of our everyday living. When Kelly and I were talking about having a conversation, I thought I'd really be happy to come on and then talk about, kind of what do you do now to make this really genuine connections in a virtual world?
Yeah. This is awesome. I want to welcome some of the people here because I love it when people like chime in and say they're here. So Diana, yay, thank you for being
here. Diana.
And always great to meet new people. Say positive family. Yes, thank you. All this kind of stuff. So this is amazing. Yes. And Joyce has amazing experience. What is screaming here from, I just had it. Where was it? Here from Louisiana. Thank you for being here, Louisiana. One of the things, Joyce, that's really shining through for me is like you and I both came from traditional careers. And there was a point in my life where I very much had this, it was almost like those horses in the carriages in Central Park. I had blinders on in terms of where my skills and abilities, where their professional, their career home was. And talk about, because you've had, financial services to startups, like talk about that process and how people could be thinking right now, as the economy kind of opens up again, as things defrost, you may have to take your skills and abilities into a new area. Talk about what you went through to imagine where your skills could belong and how people can start to take the blinders off and look bigger at where their fabulousness can find a new home.
No, that's a great question. In fact, that's something I talk about often, especially when I'm meeting with people in transition, as well as, our offices. And, Diana, who's on the call, is part of that. So thanks, Diana. And so what I tell people is, I said, look, you got trained perhaps for a job, or you've learned different jobs in your company, but now like life has happened or industries have been disrupted. And how do you say, well, this is the job I've done. I want you to stop and think, okay, I want you to write down, what is it I know and how is it I process? And begin to figure out what are your, what I call functional skills. So for instance, people who are great listeners, listening and getting a group of people together, you can help organize projects. It doesn't even matter what the industry is. I think having the confidence to know that you are the expert. And it's really up to you to say, look, here's what I've done, how I do it, and to hear what another organization needs, as opposed to going back to, well, I had this job with this title. I would forget about the titles and the job to say, look, I've done transformation. I have worked with leadership teams. I've worked with customer service. I've worked with sales teams. I really understand how to get into the mind of like, what does a customer need? Or how do I really organize a project? So talk to your accomplishments as what you've designed and put together, and put that in another context with whatever the industry is. Look, I'm talking with companies today, and probably like many of you are, where nobody's ever gone through what we're going through. And they will say to me, how do we even envision what we do? And I think it's going back to what is it you're really good at, and where it's almost as if, not that you do it for free, but it just lights you up. It's sort of what gives your day meaning. So go back to those core skills. When I was in job transition, 11 years ago, and I did financial, analysis, and I was a financial person. And then the other thing is that I listened to people around me. And one of the exercises I have people do, especially I've been coaching a number of our individual staff for a variety of things in a variety of roles. I'll ask them, I say, I want you to reach out to somebody in your trusted network, somebody that really knows you well, somebody that has your back, somebody that will tell you the truth, and ask them, what do you think I'm really good at? Not what you're not good at, what you're really good at. Because what I have found is the very thing that is so defining about what your skill set is, you take for granted because it just comes naturally. I really like people to hear from the people that know them, what is it you're really good at? And then that can help inform what you did. I went through that exercise in transition. I was like financial this, financial that. And then I mentioned one day about, what kind of organization I should join. And I said, well, should I join this financial organization? And the entire room said, oh, no, you should be in the marketing organization. I thought, marketing? I've never been in marketing. And they're like, oh, you market all the time. I was like, what? I've never done that. And I've heard that over the years.
Sometimes it's our career blind spot, because it's something that comes intuitively, and rather than dismissing it as like, oh, I don't do that, or, and I think in my own case, when someone said, you need to tell people what you do. And I was like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That thing could be your secret sauce. And I want to go back to something you were talking about before, Joyce, in really this idea of making this list of sort of two lists. One, what do your friends say you're good at? And where they're giving you a brutal, honest answer, not, oh, you're good at everything, right? But a really brutal, great, honest answer. But also this idea of like, what have you accomplished? And start breaking down those skill sets, because other things need it. And I think I'd shared with you before, and this is what I heard from friends of mine in Australia, with the global pandemic, hospitals are now, of course, the front line and are overwhelmed, and they need more staffing. So what Australia had been doing was like, okay, where can we get people with a skill set that we could take the trained nurses and caregivers off of some of these other functions? One of them was customer service. Who's got great customer service? A receptionist, a flight attendant. You start a hostess in a restaurant, a hospitality. If we could put them on the phone call on the front door of a hospital, it means someone who's trained in the medical profession can start deliver, urgent and necessary, nurse's aid, other kinds of things. They also hired people who had been in, physical jobs, like a personal trainer. Hospitals in Australia were hiring them because you need some muscles to lift up a patient, right? And so they were looking at where's the skill set, not saying, oh, I'm sorry, you've only worked at Gold's Gym, we can't hire you at the hospital. It's like, no, we need people who are physically fit, who can do this. So there's an idea of sort of thinking about skill sets. But I'd like you to kind of talk more on that, because you've had to deal with that with not just yourself, but the clientele you work with.
Yeah. And so, like, for instance, I would have somebody come in who was a trader, and, the trading desks are getting replaced by AI. And they're like, certain jobs just are going away. And so I'll tell people, I say, look, think about what you know and how you can assess and kind of, where do you pivot, right? Do you go into more the AI? Do you help advise people who are writing the AI programs? Here is what I do as a trader. Like there's all kinds of knowledge you have that then just goes to a different way to deliver it. So I just really want people to feel empowered that what's between your ears is amazing, because there's nobody who has had your experience, who's seen the world through your eyes. And to look, my biggest fear was to get fired. I mean, I'll admit it. In 2008, I was terrified. I'm like, oh my God, if I get fired, that's the end of the world. Well, it happened. And not only did I not die, I thought, okay, good. But I realized it was like, wait a minute, now I can think about what else I need. Now, of course, listen, you got to keep body and soul together. You got to be able to have a roof over your head. You know, I don't want to diminish that by any means. But take a look around you and see where there is, like, where's there a need? Where's there a fit? And how do you get in there? Right.
We're getting so much good love for your advice, Joyce. So I want to pull up some of this, and thank you for everyone who is putting in comments and sharing this. And if you've got some questions you want to ask as well, please kind of chime in there. Joyce, what are some of your thoughts? Because I know you have done this yourself, and I know you have done this with other people. Let's particularly focus on LinkedIn. How do you make those skill sets shine so that they find a new home? And how do we get people, like when I say people, employers, recruiters, perhaps,
right,
and maybe our own ego, to get over the titles and whatever? But how do we make it, like, if you know us, you know, maybe it's a coding language, maybe it's something that you did in your past. How do you make that shine so someone says, I need that today?
Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of kind of basic setting, because I think it matters. So I got into the world of online 17 years ago because I was fascinated with meeting people. So I've kind of watched the world evolve as to sort of being a very niche group to now this being standard. And what I'd say is, however you behave in real life is how you behave online. And so to me, reaching out to somebody in a way that's genuine is what matters. And, you know, I know, Kelly, you've talked about this. You wouldn't go to a cocktail party and say, hey, here's my business card, or maybe you do, but it's like, how do you approach somebody in a way where they want to meet you? So I have a couple things with LinkedIn. So for instance, I say, you know, always send a personal invite. Now I go LinkedIn, the LinkedIn mobile app's got a little better that you can actually add a personal invite, but I really recommend people do it from your desktop when you have time. And when somebody sends me a LinkedIn invite, and sometimes I get that default answer, please connect me in your professional network. I do, this is what I typically do. I wait till I have some time, and I look at their profile, and sometimes there might be other people I know that they know. Sometimes there may not be. I look at who they are. And unless it's clearly a spam bot or something that's, you know, not even close, I typically always send a note back, and I say, Dear Kelly, I personalize it. Thank you for your invitation to connect on LinkedIn. Can you please remind me how we may know each other, or if not, your reason for wanting to connect? So I send them something back genuine, personal, and here's what happens. A third of the time I get nothing at all, and so I wind up deleting those. A third of the time I get a little bit of a canned response. Well, I don't know you, but LinkedIn said we should connect. Delete. I don't know you, but we have some people we're connected with, so I thought I'd connect. I think about it, then I delete. And then the third is the ones that are genuine, honest, and true. I tell this story that I got one of these. Somebody answered me back and said, no, Joyce, I don't know you, but I was looking to connect with, you know, women in leadership. Right now, I'm trying to form a national soccer league for high schoolers, and I didn't know how to start, so I just started to look at women, and it was so genuine. You know, she was probably 22. I didn't know her, but she told me this story about what she was trying to accomplish. So I was like, I'm going to introduce you to, I think, Kelly, because you work with the LGPA. PGA, right? And then I connect her to a sports agent. I know that woman who's dealt with some major accounts. And so, because it was this wonderful story, and you know what, I can be helpful. So that's where I kind of want to end up. This is find a way to be generous.
Yeah.
Find a way to be generous.
I mean, the worst thing you can do is make people hunt around. But I really want you to dive into what the actual, like what should be on their profile, because I remember you had a story about someone who, as soon as they kind of finessed it with highlighting actual skill sets, like we were talking about before, they ended up having all sorts of inbound interest. So, because some people are so sparse on their details, and those importance of those keywords and some of that. If there's any of that you can kind of highlight, that would be awesome.
Oh, sure. Okay. So again, on the LinkedIn profile, one of the main areas that really matter is right below your name, where typically the default will be whatever your last job title is. That is a free form field, and please go in and delete just your title, because just to say I'm a vice president or doesn't give you context. Create a functional title. So on mine, I have a number of ones. So nowhere do I say, I mean, it's on my experience that I'm a senior vice president of operations at LHH, but in my functional title, it says I do workforce transformation. I'm a social media leader. I'm a branding specialist. So I talk about what are my skill sets, because those keywords, when a hiring manager or somebody in HR is looking for somebody who does social media or customer service, or that functional title is key. If it's keyword rich, that's going to pop into HR and different hiring managers' inbox. And LinkedIn, just because having worked with LinkedIn directly, the company, they've told me that I think 2/3 of their revenue comes from enterprise licenses, where a hiring manager has now realized, for me to buy a LinkedIn license for the year, which sounds like a lot of money, like 5 figures, but that could be the savings of 1/3 of a recruiter's finder's fee. Now, for all my friends, I'm really sorry, but that industry has been disrupted. And so that certainly is something to think about. That's how you can get found. Other is, to that very point, everything's getting disrupted. So when somebody says, well, just give me the names of recruiters, and I'll say, well, those recruiters have been disrupted because the hiring managers are going direct to LinkedIn to find the talent, because people like you and me and others are putting that out there.
Yeah. So change that. That's like so awesome. There's nothing worse than, and sometimes we have kind of multiple experiences that we put down there. And so then it's pulling up something, and it's not, maybe you sit on a not-for-profit board or do some community service, and you put that under your experiences, and then LinkedIn pulls that as your title, but that's not the thing you want to be found for. Or, as in my case, for a while there, I was doing a career change. I didn't want to be found as being a lawyer. I wanted the new thing. So putting on, what do you think when people put they're searching for a job in the title? What's your thought on that?
No, never. It comes across as not just desperate, but as if I don't even have any imagination of what I could even put in there. So to me, it speaks to you as an individual of like how, look, we're all in the sales business. We're all selling ourselves, like it or not. And it would be nice just to say, I just want to apply for a job online, get hired. And it's a lot of work, but this is the kind of the world we're in. But Kelly, to go back to your point of the keywords, certainly please have an about section. And try to, I'm a big believer in writing it in the first person versus third person, because people want to hear your voice, and put in there something unique about yourself or something that's interesting. Not just you have these skills. Certainly if you do any kind of volunteers or not-for-profit boards, something that makes you stand out from just everybody else with the same list of skill sets.
Yeah, I'm going to say something that makes someone want to scroll down through the rest, because LinkedIn is such a rich platform because of the projects, the experience, awards, all that stuff you can put in. That about section is a really great place to pique someone's interest, so they want to keep scrolling. And one of the things I always recommend to people is, why don't you add in there some dynamic content? Don't just tell me what I can read down further below. I love that kind of like, hey, what's something that kind of like you've described, what's the highlight? So I'm like, oh, wow, they've had this job, but they're doing this community service or whatever. But I like to say, put in some dynamic content. If you're attending, endless webinars, online courses, things that are improving your skills. Maybe you've signed up to do some COVID-19, relief work in some way. Maybe you're volunteering, like to put those things on there, because again, it starts to say a lot more about you that someone else, like I'm thinking like a recruiter or the recruiter using LinkedIn, a hiring manager using LinkedIn, makes me want to say, tell me more. Tell me more. I want to know more about you. This is interesting. Tell me more. Tell me more. Tell me more.
Great. So I love that. So definitely, I think of the LinkedIn profile as it becomes the baseline for you. And what really, to me, is so important is getting your voice out there. And that's where Kelly is saying, look, you want to have an active voice. You want people to know that you actually have something you're thinking about now, even if you're in transition. You're reading, you're volunteering, whatever it is you're doing. Maybe you help, your local community, town. Maybe you help them figure out how to set up a Zoom account. Like, think about what you're doing to be helpful. I saw something with a film crew that I've worked with in the past. And I thought, I'm sure they're not getting a lot of work right now. Well, they were like, well, we're available right now. Why don't we have a little contest and we'll let another small business that really could benefit from a 30-second commercial that we'll just offer our services. And I thought, wow, all of a sudden they're getting their message out there to a wider audience. They're getting more known. But truly think about whether it's just a LinkedIn post, find an article that really resonates with you and say, look, this is a really great article, or I did the same thing. It doesn't have to be complicated, but you want to have an active voice to let people know it's more than just an online resume. Really participate.
Yeah, that's exactly. It's sort of that we all have the same platform and technology, but how are you using it? Are you using it as sort of a digital resume? Or are you being proactive? Are you being dynamic in it? Are you being interactive? I did a webinar with the Bright Network. It's a student organization for students. It's based out of London, and these are university, college, graduate, college students and those in graduate programs. And I made the suggestion to say, okay, you're attending this online webinar on networking. Share that you attended this with your network. Share the takeaways. Start a conversation. A, you might be sharing information that's useful to somebody else, and B, I'm gonna say you might start a conversation that someone says, wow, this says something about this person. They're growing their skills. They seem to be collaborative. Maybe they're a kind of team person. They're sharing information. Like, it says something about you by those kind of nature of those posts, beyond showing, hey, how smart I am.
Yeah. And certainly, look, I always say, I call it the campaign of you. What's your campaign? Like, kind of, it's like any campaign, like it has a beginning, middle, hopefully an end, but what is it I'm trying to accomplish? How do I begin to figure out, how do I get my message out there? How do I begin to find content I can share? And people ask me how often to share. I would say, don't flood your newsfeed on LinkedIn, because there's the little three dots, ellipsis, where you can click and somebody can mute you. So the last thing you want to do is you're talking away and you're thinking, oh, I'm reaching, my 5,000 people. And if, a lot of people have muted you, it's not. So be selective. I find, I'd say maybe once a week, get some engagement. Hopefully some of you have joined this because you saw what I posted on LinkedIn. Kelly shared it. I also, shared content across Twitter and because those are platforms I use, and those are platforms where there's people I follow and people follow me, and we have genuine conversations. So it's all about stay genuine, stay you. And sometimes that's scary because it's real, but people want to meet real people. And now we're all online. And so how do we continue to be genuine and vulnerable in some cases and be helpful?
Yeah.
And to be generous now, the world will know if you're generous, and the world will know when you're not, because we can talk to anybody. We all have this platform to talk to the world.
Yeah. I love this. This came up, what questions evoke the experience of those who want to connect? I think everyone wants to connect. We just don't want to be treated like a fill in the blank. We don't want to be treated like a form letter. I mean, that's why you and I espouse the same thing. Do not use the automatic, request to connect. I am wary of, I've always been wary of templates. Like, hey, just send this one to everyone you're searching for a job with. I've always been wary of them. I'm even more wary of them now because we are getting weary from the inbound requests. The more, as Joyce said, the more authentic, the more genuine, the more human, the more vulnerable, the more you've done kind of the background and the research, right? So listening here to Joyce, for someone to say, oh, Joyce was in financial services, maybe she can help me get a job in financial services. You haven't done that job for a decade. So it's like, no, what Joyce can help you with is the transition, the guidance in that, the leveraging of the tools. It's like when people come to me and say, oh, Kelly, you were a lawyer. Can you help my friend get a job in a law firm? I haven't worked as a lawyer in a law firm since 2002, but people do that kind of silliness, as I like to say.
Yeah. The other, I'm going to call it my secret sauce. I call it. It's not so secret because I keep sharing it, is that if you want to get somebody's attention, pay attention to them. You want to really meet somebody? Like, don't ask Kelly, oh, can you tell me how to connect with venture capitalists? Like, hello. I mean, she says, like, I can't even count how many articles and things she's written. Go do the research. Pay attention. When I want to meet somebody and I'm like, I don't really know them, I figure out, have they ever spoken at a conference? Do they have any video? Can I look at to see what they appear like? I mean, I had an individual that, it was a piece of business that, we were trying to win. And I was part of the team and I started to research this person and I found he had this video clip of some talk he gave at a conference. And so in my conversation, when, we did actually have a call established, and I think before that, I even said to him, I'd really like to talk to you. And so, by the way, I love this video that you did where you talked on this topic. Well, he couldn't, I had an appointment right away. He said, I had no idea that existed. That's really good. Well, let's just say we won the business. But all I did was just pay attention to what matters to somebody. And if you do that, and if you pay attention to what matters in their world, like truly, I mean, it has to be genuine. You can't just say, oh, I know you like, people who know me know I like gardening. Oh, yeah, Joyce, I love your flowers. Oh, by the way, can you get me a job? Like, okay, whoa. That's a little too. But you'll build a relationship and you can build it because everybody wants to talk and very few of us do listen very well. And so I'm working on listening too. But I'm telling you, that is the secret to letting people pay attention. Pay attention to them in a way that's genuine, truly genuine.
Yeah. I mean,
it's amazing.
Yeah, so some of the beauty of digital, we leave little bits of ourselves in all sorts of different places. And if you go back to what, you got this brilliant thing between your ears that Joyce, that makes you unique and fabulous. And it is this thing that can do some critical thinking of connecting the dots between those various pieces to sort of say, right, who is this person and how do they like to communicate? Because my outreach to them needs to be heard by them. And then again, this goes back to why I'm, kind of get frosty on templates and standard kind of ways to outreach to people. It's like, no, what does that person want? And, going online, you can find information. You can also not find information, which should also tell you about that other person. I love this. This is great. This conversation today, this feels like a live event. And this is wonderful. Thank you, Barbara. Yes. It's how we make people feel. I mean, isn't that the way we are right now? As I've said to people, some of the best things you can do right now is just check in, see how people are. Think about, we all lose our passwords every once in a while. Think of some of our passwords reminders. It's like, who was your favorite school teacher? We remember how people make us feel. So how are you making people feel right now? How are you making them feel so they want to take your call or refer your resume? Or if it's initial outreach, how are you making them feel that they're like, oh, this person's actually got their, they got their act together. I'm going to spend some of my valuable and limited time, on them. Joyce's secret sauce. So I got to pull this up. Yes, pay attention to what they're interested in. If you were to do one thing today, Joyce, to improve your career prospects, what would be the one thing you would do?
Just continue to be a better listener. I mean, people give you the answer if you just pay attention, truly.
Yeah.
And it's developing that muscle much more, is listening, because I'm telling you, everybody wants to be heard and very few people are listening. So I really am a big advocate, and I've had to learn how to be a better listener. I like to talk. Kelly.
My good buddy Tom Peters writes the word listen on his hand before he goes into a meeting. So, all of us can work on that one. And there was a question earlier I could scroll through, but I think I've got it, which was sort of where we thought that maybe there was going to be career opportunities. And that's another example of kind of listening and observing and thinking about, as either in the short term or the long term into whatever our new normal is, there are going to be opportunities, in terms of how we need to rethink the dynamic of our lives.
Right. So look, we can't escape in the world we're in, right? We're all, those of us who love to go to live events and speak on stage, we're now here. But what I would do is to say, as you're listening, really look around and just listen to what's going on and look for the opportunities of where you can contribute. Companies are hiring. I mean, we're seeing it. It's just, you would think that's impossible, but it's not. It would just be realized, like Kelly, you were saying, look, you want to free up people who have a skill set, like, medical professionals from, being a customer service, get them back where they're needed with their skills, and then get other people who have those skill sets. So I think that's where you can begin to help companies think through, because nobody has the answer. But I think as you think through, say, look, here's what I've done. Just be convincing, be confident, because you are, and know that you can bring everything you've learned to this new situation and why you'll be successful. Because I'm telling you, companies, they need people who are confident, who can do things well, and everybody's looking for answers. So be part of the solution.
Right. And being the solution and the answers, like, absolutely. I was thinking as soon as you were saying that, and I think that's right now, because you're sitting on the outside. Some of us are sitting on the outside, and you may see the problem and the solution. I mean, I think that's the key, problem and the solution for an industry before they see it. There was a entrepreneur who I was talking to who's in the travel and hospitality space, and she was thinking of doing a complete pivot with her business. And I'm like, time out. Your clientele, have they thought through the protocols of reopening? Like I can't wait to travel again, but I want to know what the protocols are for some of these venues before I step into them.
Yeah.
Will I be more trusting of, a hotel or whether it's a large one or boutique one based on what their protocols are now for travelers, or are going to be more comfortable for someone's home? I don't know, but there's an element with me, like, what's our level? So why would you want to pivot your business completely into something new when you could say, right, I can continue to service my existing clientele in a much more expanded way, because I'm seeing the things that they're not thinking about at this point, because they're just trying to survive, right? Or they've a restaurant has pivoted from being, in service seated tables to delivery of meals. They haven't seen the protocol for opening. I've seen it. I can now pitch that, to them. So you're in a unique position of some of us sitting on the outside, and you may create a job that didn't previously existed.
Yeah, I have two little quick stories I want to
Sure.
Watching a, I think it was a PBS story about, the big earthquake of San Francisco. Hey, Kathy. The earthquake. And again, I always get the date wrong, 1918. But I remember this, at this point, older, was talking about, he was a young boy, and when this devastation in San Francisco had happened and the whole city is completely leveled, and his mother said to him, this is a very exciting time because you get to build what the new San Francisco is. And I remember thinking, when I heard this is this great time, I'm thinking, what's great about it? The whole city's been leveled. You get to create what's next. And that kind of stuck with me that, you know what, whenever we think that it couldn't be any worse, you know, if you're still here, you can help create what's next. So think about that. And the other story I want to tell is when people, and I hope some of you will find me on LinkedIn if you haven't already, is that I do a couple little blogs, and one of them is called Start Today. And it's a story I tell about when I was 10 years old. And that I went to this museum when I'm a kid in Vermont. I'm like, oh my God, the last thing I want to do, go to a museum in the summer. And I'm like, fine, I'll read these. And so I wound up walking around and reading the plaques, and these beautiful, vibrant paintings. And I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. It was like some little kid did it. And it turned out it was by Grandma Moses, if many of you may know. So I read this, and it's, you know, I forget her really, some Mary Robinson. And he said she started painting when she was 80 years old, 80. So I'm 10 years old, and I'm thinking, I'm looking at this barn with all these fabulous paintings. And I thought, she started when she was 80. And whenever I think I'm too old to do this, it's, you know, I couldn't learn anything new, I think about Grandma Moses and I say, you know what? If she could start a new career at 80, any of us can start doing anything we want today. So those are my two little stories, just a little inspiration.
It's never it's never too late to start over or restart or whatever. It's just a question of like, okay, you know, what do I want to do? Give a shout out. There's Halo 80. Exactly. 80. And, Rose. Yes.
Hi, Rose.
Hi, Rose. Oh, it's so good to see you. Yeah. Like, and here, yes, if you're still here, you got to create what's next. So what is it you want to create? What is it you want to be part of? I mean, there's so like, just, you know, sometimes we get so inside ourselves, or we cling to what was versus what is possible. And let's be honest, we're social creatures. We want to be connecting. We are not going to live our lives behind these screens. We are going to find ways to be together. And, you know, until there's more solutions, what are the solutions? What are the solutions that we can be part of creating? What are the new materials? What are the new, you know, dynamics? What are the new working teams? Like what can there be? I just kind of like, it's possible. It's really possible. So, hey, how can you be watching and listening and observing and thinking, right, where do I see the opportunities and how can I implement them, or how can I go after them? All right, here we go. Yes. How are you adaptable? What's your emotional intelligence? And maybe you start demonstrating those skills because you're volunteering or leading a project or initiating a project in your community. You know, you've seen that across the board, you know, communities coming together to get masks for frontline workers, etc., all that kind of stuff. So,
yeah, just do it. I mean, every one of you can you can be a leader. People, I'm not a leader. You know, you can do this.
What skills have been acquired during these, you know?
Need more than ever. I think resilience, just knowing that nobody has the answer because this didn't happen before. So trust your instincts. The other thing I would do is if nobody is starting, just start. Don't wait for someone to give you permission. If it turns out, hey, that's my job. And so when this whole thing started, I thought, you know what, I'm going to be in charge. And if they want to kick me out of the way because I'm doing somebody else's job, I'd be fine with that. But nobody did. So I would just say, if you see a need, just start, just go.
Right.
So, and then you've already built that muscle and look, nobody knows. And we're all different levels of being terrified. But once you do it, you realize I can do this. And it's one thing you have control over.
Right. You know, I'm thinking about this and knowing Rose has been on here and all the rest of it. So I think a number of conferences and events have moved online and they want to, they're likely to stay online. What do we need as human beings to have a great conference experience, right? You start like, you know, you think about like, we like to go, we would like the serendipity. We like to be guided. We like the interaction. So everybody here who is, you know, moderating and chiming in and tweeting. Well, you know what? I think for big conferences that go online, you're going to need those people. You can't just throw up, you know, a great content or have a great speaker without the rest of the kind of accoutrements, so to speak, of a conference. And you're going to need to hire people who make the online conference experience replicate, go back to what you and I are both advocates of, that seamlessness between online and offline. So, these kinds of things that, people including this kind of stuff, this is really valuable. These asking of questions. May not be seeing it like I am, Joyce, the conversation between attendees, right? Those are roles.
So one thing I would say is that, one thing I want to just emphasize as well is that really this whole thing about trust and care. And what I've seen is organizations that are service providers where they can move their services online, people are willing to pay because they want that service available. They don't want to take advantage, if they can pay. And I've watched businesses pivot to doing completely online. How many of you been to, like my yoga class I love. And so she figured out how to be Zoom. And so there's 30 of us online in our spaces with the instructor we trust, right? And so think about whether you're in that space yourself, if you have a private practice or whatever, if you met clients person to person, just figure out, how do I get to that platform and know that people, they trust you and they still want to work with you. So find a way to do that virtually like we are now. And there's a lot of different ways to take virtual payments. So there's a whole way to continue to have a business if in fact, again, it's a service that you could move to virtual. So
yeah, and building and helping somebody else grow and develop a new industry. Obviously, the conference industry is going to change. The wedding industry is going to change. It doesn't mean they're going to disappear. People are still going to get married. People are still want to aggregate and gather together to have a conference-like experience. How do we make the online as rich as the offline? Those are opportunities. Joyce, I know you have a big
I have to go. And this has been great. I could keep talking, but
Thank you. Everyone got our Twitter handles and find us online. And I'm like just trying to find right at the beginning when I posted this. Come and find us online. Bring more questions there. Joyce, thank you so much for being so generous with your thoughts, your time, everything today. Thank you to everyone who attended. We'll see you again.
Everybody.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.